Buenas tardes, good afternoon. It is a pleasure to be here with a very dear friend, Charlie Rivkin, chairman of the Motion Picture Association. As you probably have read in the bios in the North Capital Forum booklet, Charlie is a very renowned diplomat, but has also served in the private sector as CEO of the Henson Company back in the days when they had the Muppets, and has been Assistant Secretary of State, U.S. Ambassador to France, and for the past, how many years? 5, 6? 7 years now. He's been chairing the Motion Picture Association, which, as you know, is the trade body of the Hollywood studios in the States and around the world. So, Charlie, welcome to Mexico. It's really a delight to have you here at the North Capital Forum.
Well, Alejandro, I just want to say it's always so great to see you. I see you all over the world, and to see you back here in Mexico City. I haven't been here for 2 years, and what a trip it's been. I arrived just in time to see the inauguration, to see that historic moment, so I'm having a lot of fun.
It's wonderful that you're here at such a momentous time. And Charlie, I'd like to start our conversation just by asking you, something related to the industry as a whole. Our industry, the audiovisual entertainment industry, has undergone a lot of disruption over the past decade. We have the rise of the streaming platforms. They're omnipresent in every home or most homes around the world. We had a COVID pandemic that shut down all movie theaters around the world for almost a period of 2 years and changed the entire ecosystem. We had the screenwriters and actors strike last year. We have the rise of artificial intelligence and both the potential threat and the positive impact it can have on post-production, special effects, animation, etc. So with all this disruption and changes in the ecosystem, what do you envision to be the future trends of our industry over the next 5 to 7 years?
Well, first of all, I completely agree with you. Our industry, as everybody I think here knows, suffered a double gut punch. It's one thing for COVID to literally, as you know better than anybody, shut down theaters and shut down many productions, less so here in Mexico, but many productions. But then to have the writer's strike, the director's strike, the actor's strike on top of it, really set the industry back. And luckily those have been resolved and we're back on our feet. The one thing that happened during the pandemic and during the last few years is the streaming services have really taken root in so many ways beyond Netflix. The MPA now has 7 members, and our 7th, and I think Amazon is represented here in the audience today. We're very proud to bring them on board as of yesterday. But all 7 have some form of streaming. So our industry is, I'd say, you're going to see more consolidation in the industry, to answer your question. We are anticipating an evolution of piracy, which is an existential threat to our industry that we're trying to stay ahead of. And we're going to see, consumers with more and more choices, the ability to watch your favorite movie or television show on all of your different devices when you want, where you want, as well as in theaters, including your theaters.
Thank you, Charlie. Mexico is a market that has been growing in importance for Hollywood. Just over the past 5 to 10 years, Mexico reached a $1 billion box office only in the theatrical, Hollywood equation in 2019. And even though it had an impact, it's come back to roughly $1 billion last year. And for most movies, actually for the top 10 movies of 2024, Mexico has been either the number 1, 2, or 3 international market that is outside of the US. For instance, the biggest film of this year, Inside Out 2, Mexico is the number 1 film, the number 1 market in the world outside of the US, with 24.5 million attendance and over $100 million in box office. So what is the economic and cultural importance of Mexico for the MPA? And 2, if you can share with us, how has the USMCA helped strengthen the bilateral trade in audiovisual content?
Wow, okay, so there's a lot of questions in there. Let me take them one at a time. First of all, Mexico. Mexico, writ large, is America's greatest trading partner, and I think that America is Mexico's greatest trading partner. And the audiovisual industry is increasingly becoming an important part of it, like you mentioned. But you know what we do, Alejandro, this industry, film and television, we create 206,000 jobs inside Mexico. These are working class jobs. These are not just the stars that walk the red carpet, but they're construction workers and electricians and hairdressers and caterers. And in fact, if 10 pesos is spent on a movie here, 7 of those pesos are spent in those other support industries. So this industry drives the local economy. When a major movie is made in Mexico City or any other major city in the world, it injects about $1.3 million a day into the local economy. So it's great for Mexico, it's great for the United States, and the jobs that are paid here are about 30% higher than the average wage pay. So it is an enormously important. You mentioned USMCA, and I think in a lot of ways USMCA has been a big driver of our increased investment in Mexico, our industry. I don't want to get too technical, but there's a clause in the USMCA called the Technical Production Measures, the TPMs, and what they do is they make it criminal for somebody to hack into our encryption systems, which wasn't criminal before. And so it allows us to go after pirates in a very, very important way. And when it was passed by the Supreme Court, which was a big, when it was approved by the Supreme Court, it also included site blocking measures, which is also huge. Alejandro, remember when we met in Las Vegas at CinemaCon, I've been talking about how America needs to be putting in place a site blocking law. Mexico beat us to it, and I know that just very recently, Janula was the first site blocking measure taken down here in Mexico, and Janula was the 3rd largest streaming site in all of Mexico. And the guys that run these pirated sites are largely organized crime. These are not kids in their living rooms sharing files. These are criminals that do sex trafficking and drugs and child prostitution, and they also steal movies. So when we shut down these sites, it helps society as well as the entertainment industry. And I forgot your tag-on question after that, but you mentioned. But what else did you mention?
No, it was how has the USMCA strengthened the bilateral trade on audiovisual content?
Well, that's what it's done, and we're going to continue to invest. All 7 of the Motion Picture Association studios consider Mexico one of the most important markets in the world.
That's great to hear, and great advances on fighting piracy. Now, you just mentioned the growing importance of local content. We have seen in recent years some markets that have very wisely devise strategies to incentivize local production. Countries like Brazil, like Uruguay, like Colombia have a set of fiscal incentives and fiscal schemes that promote local production and have also allowed for the local content industry to flourish. What do you think Mexico can do to improve or to become a more attractive destination for American or MPA studios' productions?
Well, Alejandro, let me broaden that question to talk about the world for a moment. It's amazing. The local content, investment in local content, is the future of certainly the American entertainment industry, and I'm sure the industry at large. When you think about, for those of you that know, Netflix's Squid Game, for example, that was made in Korea, local Korean audience in Korean, local Korean actors, a small-ish show that went on to be one of the biggest hits in Netflix worldwide, I think over $2 billion. And the reason why is that good stories, well told, transcend borders. And at the same time, that show on Netflix, along with many other Korean productions, are all about Korean local culture. And so the world is getting to see this culture. And the same thing in France. I served as ambassador there. When I was growing up, I couldn't watch a French television show in America because they weren't available. And now shows like Call My Agent and there's a show, there are so many, Lupin. These are culturally rooted in France that are now common terms in America. In Spain, we have Money Heist, Casa del Papel, that's a huge, huge success. And it doesn't matter anymore where something's produced. What matters is that they're good shows. And so the same thing is in Mexico. I mean, when you think about it, Coco, which I thought was Disney, spent a tremendous amount of time making sure they got it culturally appropriate. A global film that celebrated Mexican culture in so many ways. Roma, same idea with Netflix, but more recently, I mean, 007 Spectre. I learned this recently from Carla, who's in the audience, who runs our operations in the entire region, and that the Day of the Dead that was shown in 007 Spectre, the parade didn't exist before the movie. So the movie comes out, and everybody's saying, well, when's the parade? And tourists start coming to Mexico looking for the parade, so the parade was created. But that's the kind of thing that happens when you invest locally and you project culture locally. And lately, Amazon, Who Killed Him, is a local production that I think is going to be it's a big success. And as we were talking about backstage, Pedro Paramo, which is debuting soon, and I think November 6th is going to be the official release. That was a Netflix film that's going to be a very, very important film in this market. So what can be done more? Local production. It tells the world about your country. It's good for us. It's good for you. It's good for the country. What can we do more? And the answer, I think, one of the many answers, has to do with incentives. One interesting story. I don't know if you guys have seen Jodie Foster was in True Detective recently, the most recent series that she did, and it was all about the Alaskan tundra, and it took place in the midnight sun in Alaska. You'd think it'd be made in Alaska, but it was made in Iceland. And the reason it was made in Iceland is because Alaska as a state doesn't have a production incentive. And the reason that people are leaving, or producing in America is because of the incentives. So Georgia, huge program, New York, New Jersey, California, Illinois, elsewhere. But they compete with the UK and France, and in many ways Italy and Germany, and certainly Spain, who's become one of the leaders in Europe. So the reason I tell you this is Mexico doesn't even have an incentive program. We're coming here, we're investing massively here. But imagine what would happen if you became competitive with the rest of the world and actually provided an incentive for us to come here and generate even more revenue for the Mexican people, Mexican tax dollars, jobs, employment. It'd be a huge difference. And I think its time has come.
I agree, and now that you mentioned Jodie Foster's True Detective 4th season, it was directed by a Mexican filmmaker.
That's right.
Isa Lopez.
That's right.
Which Jodie has said that it's the best director that she's ever worked with. She's worked with the greatest, Scorsese and Jonathan Demme and many others. Right. And they're now doing the 5th season of Night Country, also of True Detective, also directed by Isa Lopez. And Jodie just won the Emmy, her first Emmy for her performance in True Detective. Anyway, and Pedro Páramo that you mentioned, is the adaptation and the first feature film directed by Rodrigo Prieto, who's been nominated 5 times for an Academy Award, but for Best Cinematography, but this is his first try as a filmmaker. So we'll be looking forward to seeing it. Going back to a movie theft and fighting piracy, I know that's always been one of the top priorities of the Motion Picture Association, both on the legislative front as well as on the law enforcement arena. I'd like to ask you on the legislative front, what is still preventing legislation like the one you mentioned or shared with us at CinemaCon that you're trying to enact in the US? What is it preventing this legislation from being passed in the US Congress?
Well, look, I appreciate the question. Piracy is an existential threat to the entertainment industry. And, in your business, Alejandro, if a movie is stolen pre-release, it can impact box office by as much as 20% by our statistics. And those theater owners lose. The people that work in movies lose, but the people that make movies are the ones who are losing as well. When piracy takes place, everybody in this audience loses because, if you go, well, I shouldn't say that actually. If you go to a piracy site, which none of you would do, but if you go to a piracy site, you have about a 75% chance of having your computer infected. I mentioned that it's run by organized crime. The advertisements on these piracy sites are about people that advertise are hoping to infect your computer, steal your identity, and harm consumers. So, why would you go there? Because when you go to one of these sites, It looks like Netflix or Disney or any of our studios' streaming services, but even better because it has every movie you can think of and it's free. It's almost too good to be true because it is. And so we've been trying to shut this down for the sake of the industry, but it's hard. Because nowadays, piracy is not only sophisticated, but it's highly technical. So a stream of a movie, a streamer's movie coming into your home, can be stream ripped, as they call it, stolen, with a perfect digital copy in under 4 seconds and uploaded to one of these illegal sites 3 seconds later. So within 7 seconds, a perfect movie that it could be completely stolen and out into the public for free. So how do you fight that? Well, what we did is when I joined 7 years ago the Motion Picture Association, we built a global operation. We have over 60 companies around the world that are working with us in this region and all regions to band together and become the most powerful anti-piracy fighting force that's ever been assembled. It's the Motion Picture Association's 6 core members, actually. Amazon was one of the founding members, and they're a new member, but we have Disney, Warner Brothers, Netflix, Sony, Paramount, NBCU joining Amazon Prime, and Apple TV+. And in addition to that, another 55 or more members. So we've been making headway. The problem is, and I mentioned at CinemaCon that you raised, the problem is that America doesn't have a site blocking law yet. And so recently, the MPA took down a site called F Movies, based in Vietnam. The reason it's in Vietnam is where the top 5 English language piracy sites in the world are based. Now there's only 4, but it was 5 before we took it down. And they go where where the criminals are able to operate without interference from the government. And so it took us a long time to take down F Movies. F Movies had 9 billion, with a B, hits a year on their site. But it took us 7 years. And during those 7 years, the 60 other nations on Earth who have site blocking, including Mexico now, could not access F Movies because it would be blocked, but not in America. So the American consumers continue to be at risk. So we are hopeful that Congress will pass a bill that catches us up with 60 other nations on Earth to stop this from happening. And I know that there's a lot of bipartisan interest in America to do that, and I can't predict when it'll happen, but we're certainly fighting to make it happen.
Well, congratulations on bringing down F Movies. I know that was a big accomplishment. Sticking with piracy, you've mentioned also that piracy costs around $1 billion in lost box office just to movie theaters. And one factor that has contributed to online piracy becoming a more widespread is when films are still in theaters, is the availability of films in the digital space. We have seen how illegal downloads spike all around the world once a film has been released on video on demand, even if only in the US. And for this reason, exhibition companies have been so vocal about an exclusive theatrical window that is long enough to prevent this cannibalization. My question is, how aware are your member companies that a short window in the US impacts digital piracy and negatively affects the global box office, not only the US?
In many countries around the world, let me take Europe, for example, there is a very, very long window. And what we do in those countries is, in some cases, 6 months. What we do in those countries is we show the leaders that, the average movie, and you would know better than anybody else, is really only has a certain lifespan. And after that, if it's not available to the public's going to look for a way to steal it. And so you increase the likelihood of piracy if it can't be available in that piracy window that we call after theatrical and before it's available to the public. But as far as U.S. companies and windowing in general, each of the studios has a different philosophy, and I know you know this. They all have different business models, and they all are exploring these possibilities. Some studios, even during the pandemic, went day and date. Others maintained a 90-day window, a 60-day window, a 45-day window. It's been all over the place, and it's in a period of experimentation. Each company needs to make a business decision, so I, as an industry association chief, I can't really have an opinion about this because I don't want to be involved with antitrust. I can't lead that effort, but I know it's being looked at very carefully, economically, culturally, in terms of piracy by all 7 of my studios.
Yeah, thank you. No, I'll just mention one example. Five Nights at Freddy last year did very well in Mexico and throughout Latin America, but the problem is that in the U.S. it had a window of 0 days. Universal released it in Peacock the same day it released in theaters, and of course you saw the spike in piracy not only in the U.S. but everywhere in the world. So this type of the length of the window does matter, and I completely agree with you that if you leave it too long, that also fuels piracy because people get impatient and they want to see it. But if you leave it too little and you put it in streaming services very fast, that cannibalizes through digital piracy the box office.
Well, I mean, I know that some of the streamers that maybe be here in the audience would have a different perspective on all that, but I hear what you're saying.
Yeah. Now, last year, if we go back to 2019, the year prior to the pandemic, the global box office was almost $42 billion. Yet last year, in 2023, was after 2 years of recovery, was only $33 billion. So we're still 20% down from the pre-pandemic record, which was 2019. What are your thoughts, Charlie? How do you see the recovery of the global box office going forward? This year we're still impacted by lower content due to both the screenwriters and the actors strikes, but we're foreseeing a very good 2025 and an even better 2026. Pricewaterhouse thinks that 2026 may be the year in which we'll reach pre-pandemic levels, but it's been already 6 years. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I'll give you my thoughts, but I'd love to hear your thoughts afterwards, since you're very much aware of it. Look at what's happening this year. We have Inside Out, 2 with $1.7 billion of global box office. Deadpool, Wolverine at $1.3 billion. Despicable Me approaching $1 billion at $955 million. Huge performance by Dune Part 2, Godzilla. And you mentioned Mexico and the $103 million for Inside Out, but Mexico led the entire region with $43 million in Deadpool, Despicable Me, another $45 million. Mexico's a huge part of all that. What I see is momentum. I mentioned earlier that we now have a 7th member of the Motion Picture Association. I'm so proud to have Amazon Prime Video and including Amazon's MGM Studios in the Motion Picture Association. Last year, Amazon spent almost $19 billion on content in film and television. And that was a 14% increase over the previous year. And it shows you that there's huge interest in continuing this massive investment from my industry. But I will say that it's been tough. And so this should be, based on these numbers, a decent year. But my take is that 25 will be better and 26 will be pre-pandemic levels. Would you agree with that, or what's your take?
I concur. I think 25 will be a great year, and I think in most markets we will be approaching pre-pandemic levels, and I think 26 for sure will be a year in which we will surpass the pre-pandemic record. So fingers crossed, and hopefully no more strikes. Are there any dark clouds in the horizon in terms of potential strikes of other guilds?
I can't predict that, but I could ask you, going back, how are theaters dealing with this? Because, you pioneered in so many ways this high-end theater with different pricing model, which has been so successful. I've heard that other theaters are starting to take a multiplex and turn it into a multi-entertainment center with bowling alleys and other things to entertain besides movies. But, are only the big theaters going to survive? How about the little guys, the small town theaters? Are they going to make it through this? What do you think?
Well, I think I think we would all be surprised if we look at how many theaters closed after the pandemic. It's not a significant number. Like in our case, we just shot a handful of theaters in Mexico and a handful in other markets. So I do think people have come back to the theaters, especially for big budget films. The films that have struggled a little bit are smaller dramas and more art house films, but we do see that there's an appetite to see, for instance, more romantic comedies. Anyone But You, I think, was a big surprise for everybody, and it ends with us. It's another movie that we weren't expecting that much. It's done over $200 million around the world. It's done great in Mexico and throughout Latin America. So I do think there's room, for even the, small art house to the larger multiplex. Especially we've been experimenting with other types of content, not only films, but also alternative content. Concerts have been pretty big. Last year we did very well with the Taylor Swift concert, as you well know, but also Korean pop, BTS, Blackpink, and also Japanese anime, sporting events. So all of that, it already accounts to 5.5% in our revenues, and I think it will grow. It will only grow in the years to come.
Well, I agree with you, and I think that's fantastic. The Motion Picture Association is representing film, television, and streaming, so it's a three-part in many ways. I just got to tell you, at least my belief is, I don't know if the audience agrees, but there's nothing like going to a movie theater to see a film. 1% of the population might approximate, maybe much less, the type of sound quality and picture image that you can have in their home theaters. But home theaters are becoming more prevalent, and so theaters need to find a reason to pull people out of their homes and go to the movies. But once you're there, you're reminded of the fact that a comedy, like you mentioned, is just funnier when people sitting next to you that you've never met before are laughing their head off at the screen. And a scary film, when someone's yelling out, "Don't go into that room," you get scared. It's a community event, and it certainly it forges memories from childhood through adulthood, bonds between generations. It's not going to go away. The question is, when does it return?
I agree, and I think something that we've learned after the pandemic is that the formats that recover the fastest after the pandemic are the premium cinemas, the luxury cinemas that you mentioned that we pioneered in Mexico over 2 decades ago, in which you have waiter service your seat, a full reclining seat, wider variety of food and beverages. People are looking for more complete experiences when they go out, and in our future growth, we're emphasizing more and we're giving a larger weight to growing in premium cinemas because they're doing better than the traditional sort of average cinema. To start closing, you have mentioned in the past, and in the words of your late mentor, Jim Henson, that media, if used properly, could be an enormous source of good in the world. Given the current state of affairs in the world, from the US to Europe to Latin America to Asia, with growing polarization and an increase of fake news and alternative facts, how do film and television series contributing to a more harmonious world? How are the MPA members balancing a sense of business and a sense of doing good?
Well, thank you for mentioning that quote. It's true. I ran, I don't know how many people know of it, but the Jim Henson Company for many years, for almost 15 years. And Jim Henson himself was this brilliant man, one of the most creative people I've ever met in my life. And he really did believe that media, if used properly, could be an enormous source for good in the world, because he created a show called Sesame Street, which some of you may know, and he created a show called Fraggle Rock, which less of you will know, but it was a show about world peace, but you didn't know it. You were just a kid watching it, but it was people that didn't get along but needed each other to survive. And Jim had a positive, upbeat message in everything that he did, and he did make the world a happier and better place. I don't believe in general that that's the role of the entertainment industry. I do think that we are a reflection of our society, and that we tell uncomfortable truths sometimes. And in America, we have the ability to do that because of our First Amendment rights. And we've told stories in American film history about assassinations of presidents, about slavery. We've told stories about the Vietnam War when the wounds were raw. We told stories that were uncomfortable, but they needed to be told. And when I was ambassador in France, I remember once I was we had a dinner at the residence, and we showed a movie about the financial crisis, and the French minister said, "You see, you have America has destroyed the world. Like, it's on screen. I can see it. It's on screen. There's no debate about this. You have done this." And I told him that we were unafraid of telling this story, and asked him how many stories the French had told about the French-Algerian War. The answer is not very many. So maybe they're not the most diplomatic thing to have said, but we were friends. We were friends, But the point is that we do that, and I don't think people want to see mission-driven entertainment. They want to be entertained, and if that entertainment reflects a reality that helps them think differently about the world, that's great. But I will tell you that entertainment bonds nations together. It bonds our cultures together. It's a soft power that unites people, and you need that soft power now more than ever, given what's happening in the world.
Well, with that, thank you very much, Charlie, for a very interesting conversation, and let's hope that we can continue strengthening the relationship of the U.S. and Mexico through audiovisual content, through art, through culture, and through television. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Alejandro. Thank you.